Karen is right outside of the Supreme Court this morning. Karen, thank you for joining us. We had three very interesting decisions, the biggest of which, of course, was the abortion ruling. What has been the reaction outside of the court?
Oh, excitement and jubilation from the pro-choice activists who've been gathered outside the court since before dawn, before I got here even. Very excited that the Supreme Court has struck down these Texas laws. And just to give you the background, in 2013, Texas passed these laws that would require abortion providers to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital and require abortion facilities to comply with requirements for ambulatory surgical centers. Well, today, the Supreme Court says that placed an undue burden on a woman's right to choose, that neither law provided medical benefits to justify that burden, which is exactly what the doctors and clinics who are the plaintiffs were arguing in this case.
This has been argued that it is the clinic shutdown law. That's a little kind of side note that has been associated with this. Any idea how widespread the reports that I'm hearing, this could affect a lot of laws that either are in place or are planned for some states that we're going to follow Texas?
Yeah, exactly. In terms of just the on-the-ground impact, 19 clinics now in Texas will stay open, and some of the other ones, about 24 that had closed when the law went partially into effect, may now reopen. But in terms of the sweeping effect across the country, there was a similar law in Wisconsin that had been struck down by a lower court, but now presumably this invalidates, by the Supreme Court decision, this invalidates that law. And there's a similar law in Louisiana that's currently going through the court process, and this ruling likely invalidates that as well. Still trying to get a read on how big of an effect this will have. Everybody,
of course, with the vacancy that we have in the court always wonders what would the difference be. This would have just simply become a 5-4 decision rather than a 5-3 with Justice Scalia, again, assuming...
That's the assumption.
Yeah, that's the assumption at this point. I have to ask a little bit, too, about the court backing gun curbs, is the headline, gun curbs in domestic violence cases, and this would fall down into the misdemeanor category.
Right. This is an interesting case. So the Supreme Court rejected the claims from two men who had been convicted of domestic violence, and they say that shouldn't make them lose their constitutional right to a firearm. There's a federal law that bans someone convicted of that crime from owning a gun. The men had argued that the law should only apply to what they called intentional acts of abuse, not those committed in the heat of an argument or through reckless behavior. The court disagreed, a 6-2 decision, saying that narrowly focused federal law is okay.
This is an interesting one because the 6-2, the two are a bit of odd couples. This also was a unique case in that it's the first time, I think, ever that Justice Thomas actually asked the question.
He did. This was kind of caught everybody's surprise. He can talk. He is asking questions. First time in ages that he had done that, and he was having some tough questions. He had concerns about the fact that this was a misdemeanor violation, potentially stripping somebody from that constitutional right. But 6-2 decision today against those men bringing the case. Also, just to mention the other interesting case that had a lot of local interest here, but also has potentially national ramifications. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell had brought his conviction on federal corruption charges up to the Supreme Court and was looking to get it overturned. This is a huge win for him today. Unanimously, the Supreme Court overturned that conviction, saying that the jury had bad instructions on what constitutes bribery. McDonnell took payments and gifts from this wealthy businessman. That's not up for debate. But he says he didn't do anything in return because of getting those gifts and payments. And today, this case could have big ramifications that makes it harder to potentially prosecute public officials accused of corruption.
Well, you think of the things that are pending right now. There are some legislators, state legislators around the country. There are various corruption rulings. And so it could be interesting because many of them were kind of on hold until the Supreme Court decided on this one. I'll tell you, this is major league, though. When you look at $175,000, I like the laundry list. Luxury goods. This guy was taking...
This wasn't just some chump change. This was legitimate. There was a lot of investigative reporting that brought this whole story out from the Washington Post, looking into exactly what he was getting. And McDonnell said up and down that he didn't give any special favors because of this. He certainly took the gifts, but it's that quid pro quo then that gets into the murky area.
Yeah, it is interesting. Do you think there's a chance that this will be retried? That door has been somewhat left open as it stands, as you mentioned, unanimous decision. But do you think the Eager Beaver prosecutors back in Virginia are going to go after this again?
Yeah, it certainly seems like that they would try and bring him up again, could set him up for a new trial. I think they'd like another crack at it.
Hey, this has been most informative. Thank you so much for taking time to join us, Karen.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Karen Travers, our friend and colleague at ABC News, who is literally outside of the Supreme Court. You know, it is exciting to be there. It's exciting when arguments are being made, when decisions come down. Now, I've never been there when the decision has come down, but I have been there when the arguments are made, and it is a circus outside of the court. You might recall that we did our radio broadcast back there, as did the morning team a year ago, back in, as a matter of fact, Amanda Dixon was able to actually be in the court for the argument itself on the Supreme Court arguments surrounding same-sex marriage. I was outside. Amanda happened to be inside the court. And it is really something to watch. Outside, you look at all of the falderall, you look at all of the festivities, you look at all of the protesting and all of the placards and all of the costume. And the fact is, when all that is going on, the Supreme Court justices on the inside, unless they choose to watch the news later in the afternoon, are pretty much insulated from all of that, and it's pretty much a show for the rest of us.